This might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually prefer Justice League, #JLAS, over Justice League Unlimited. Don't get me wrong, JLU is a great show, and I understand why it's so beloved by fans. The long-running storylines that included plot points that had been in the making for over a decade must have felt so satisfying to longtime viewers. But I personally felt that there was less focus, thanks to the massive roster of characters. Some of the deep-cut character references felt a bit too much like homework for me at times. Really, does anyone care about Professor Milo? I prefer the more straightforward storylines of Justice League. Most of the storylines were confined to 2 parts, and there were rarely more than 7 heroes at a time. Now, you may immediately accuse me of hypocrisy when I tell you that my favorite episode of Justice League was Hereafter. A story filled with superhero cameos, multiple villains, and deep-cut references to events from Superman the Animated Series. Never let it be said that I am not complex and rife with contradictions. But the reason I love Hereafter so much is not because of the cameos. Although, yeah, I did like seeing all those different Green Lanterns in the background. It's because it's a story about loss, love, and redemption. And I find that very relatable. If you've never seen this show before, seriously, stop watching this and go watch it. I'll wait. Hereafter is the DC Animated Universe's version of the famous comic book story, The Death and Return of Superman. They lift some of the imagery from the comics. The funeral procession made up of superheroes, the Justice League acting as pallbearers, and Batman skulking in the shadows, watching from a distance. But in true DCAU fashion, the end result is very different. Hereafter Part 1 opens with the formation of the Superman Revenge Squad, a group of supervillains that form a little group dedicated to taking out the Man of Steel once and for all. Among their members are Metallo, Calabac, Livewire, Weather Wizard, and Toyman. They're kind of like a Superman villain version of the Justice League, but they're nowhere near as well coordinated as the real thing. The League are able to take out most of the members with relative ease, but Toyman causes them some trouble when he pilots a gigantic mech with some sort of disintegration laser. Seeing that Toyman has Batman and Wonder Woman in his sights, Superman selfishly flings himself in front of them, taking the brunt of the blast and getting erased from existence. The emotion of this scene is heightened by the fact that the dramatic music stops, leaving an eerie silence as Batman tries to take in what has happened, while Wonder Woman deals with her grief the only way she knows how, with violence. I really like how Batman and Wonder Woman react completely differently to their grief. While Wonder Woman starts out angry, the Flash talks her down, and she and the rest of the Justice League try to honor their fallen friend. The funeral scene is particularly rewarding because we see characters like the Kents, Lois Lane, and even Lex Luthor among the mourners, and Lex genuinely seems lost without Superman. Batman, meanwhile, refuses to believe that Superman is dead. He argues that you can't just destroy matter without leaving signs of it behind, and Toyman's laser seems to have just done that. Sure, there's no evidence that Superman is still alive, but there's no evidence that he's definitely dead either. There are only 2 times I can think of where Batman has talked to the deceased. Once, in Mask of the Phantasm, when he begged his parents to release him from his vow and allow him to marry Andrea Beaumont. And this scene, where he talks to the Superman statue at the Superman Memorial. Meanwhile, the Justice League has a private wake on the Watchtower, where they recount their fondest memories of Superman, and this wake is rudely interrupted by the scroungy space biker, Lobo. Lobo and Superman had a lot in common. They're both the last survivors of their respective species, although Lobo intentionally killed off his people. And they're both incredibly powerful. So Lobo thinks he'd make the perfect replacement for Superman. And, in a way, he was right. After Superman's funeral, it seems like all of the villains on Earth are rioting, completely certain that no one will be able to stop them. Enter the Justice League, who, without Lobo's help, may have struggled, and the look of sadness on their faces as they realize this is palpable. So, it's funny then that it would turn out that Batman was right. You can't just erase matter. Superman had been transported in time to the distant future where the Earth had been left in ruins. When Superman comes to, he thinks he's on a distant world with a red sun, which leaves him stranded without his powers. His watchtower communicator is still working, so he follows the tracking signal to see if his colleagues are there. What he finds is the watchtower in ruins and the immortal Vandal Savage. Another reference to past episodes, oh no, who seems to have had a complete personality transplant caused by centuries of loneliness. One of the things I find really fascinating about Savage is how he collects the world's relics and keeps them in his home. I get that he's trying to preserve humanity in his own way. I mean, he can't bring everyone back, so his collection acts as a way of him holding on to their memory. This also acts as a constant reminder of what he did, and it fills him with grief. It's a self-inflicted punishment, his own way of paying penance for the catastrophe that he caused. There's no one around to punish him, so he does it himself. I find Savage's position in this episode really relatable. I've never destroyed a planet and all the people living on it, but I have lost people close to me. If you've ever suffered the misfortune of losing a loved one, and you're anything like me, your mind will dwell on all of the times you weren't as kind as you could have been, all of the arguments and the harsh words that were exchanged. And knowing that you can never say sorry to them is a pain that truly never goes away. So he's utterly delighted to see Superman, even if Superman is less pleased to see him. And it turns out that Superman may be the key to undoing Savage's mistake. As you may remember from the JLAS 3-parter, The Savage Time, Vandal Savage has a time machine. Oh god, there's another deep cut reference, but it has a limitation. You can only travel back in time to a point where you didn't exist. To Savage, this is useless because he's an immortal caveman that has been alive for millennia. I had wondered why he didn't send a message back in time to himself to tell him to stop what he was doing. But given what we know about the present-day Savage, I doubt he would have listened. However, in the present day, Superman is not there. He's believed to be dead. And armed with Vandal Savage's information, he can stop any of this from ever happening. There's just one problem. The massive insects that now rule the world have taken the time machine's energy source and are using the heat it generates as an incubator at the heart of its nest. So Superman and Savage have to team up and fight their way through a million massive insects to save humanity. I have to say that I cannot resist doing a little clap every time I see Superman getting his powers back from the energy radiating from the power source. I guess it acts like a mini yellow sun. All of this leads to Superman's return in the present day, just in time to save Batman from being killed by Deadshot, and unceremoniously kick Lobo out of the Justice League. The use of Lobo in this episode was utterly perfect. He's a character I really enjoy seeing, but I'm glad they don't overuse him because he could potentially get a bit old. The closing moments of this episode are among my favorite of the entire DCAU. Vandal Savage sits outside the ruins of the Superman Memorial, which is still standing after all of that time, just about, and he starts to see people fade into existence. He sincerely utters the words, "Thank you, my friend," as he fades away. Chills every time. Vandal Savage knew that resetting the timeline would essentially kill him, but he was glad to do it. He had lived for thousands of years, many of them spent in isolated self-loathing after he accidentally killed everyone on Earth. To him, his death was the price he had to pay to undo that terrible mistake. It's just a shame that this version of Vandal Savage wouldn't get to see the bright future he helped to restore. On the plus side, in the present day, Batman got to say, "I told you so," which is never a bad thing. Okay, that's it for this video essay. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, thanks to Serum Lake, my husband Luke, who edited this video and made the thumbnail. If you could like the video, leave a comment, share it on social media, or even click the bell button. I'd really appreciate it. Let me know if there are any other Justice League villains you'd like me to talk about. Special thanks to Rez the Media Ruler 3768 for the suggestion of talking about Vandal Savage. I must admit, I have also been considering talking about some of the characters seen in other shows, like X-Men 97. Until next time, thanks guys, have a great day, love you, bye.